to my channel. So today I'm going to go through my top 5 eyeshadow palettes of my collection and my bottom 5 eyeshadow palettes. Somebody asked in a comment in one of my recent videos if I could do this, and I thought it would be a good idea. So here it is. It was very, very hard. For the most part, I'm pretty lucky and I like almost every single palette in my collection. So choosing the bottom was somewhat easier than choosing the top because I have so many favorites, and just picking 5 honestly broke my heart on some of them. And on any other given day, I probably would pick different top 5, but this is what I've chosen today. I'm not 100%. Probably 90-ish%, but we're gonna go with it, If anyone wants me to rank all of my eyeshadow palettes from bottom to top, I can do that in a separate video, just take a little bit longer. I was planning maybe to do that today, but I just don't have the time to figure out which ones, like which order I would do it. But I can absolutely do that in another video if you all want to see what I have to say about them. All right, let's start with the bottom 5. There's a couple of palettes that I could have definitely included in my bottom 5, but I took it as if I had to declutter some palettes today, would I be happy to declutter these palettes? Or potentially maybe just save a couple of shades and toss the rest. And I think with these palettes, I definitely feel like I can declutter them today if I absolutely had to. So here we go. The 5th one, which technically would be the least of the bottom, you know, we're gonna go that way, would actually be my Let's Pop from Gloss Gods. This is the Peach Pop shade. They came out with 5 of these. They all come with 5 different shades, and I just felt like this was very subpar compared to the other palettes that I have from Gloss Gods. It just wasn't the same quality that I was used to and I was raving about. And as much as I would love to love this palette, I just ultimately don't. I really don't care for these 2 mattes. I don't think they work very well. These 3 shades are fine. Like this matte pops, it really, really does. It's very, very vibrant. I don't even think it shows up on camera very well. It is ultra, it's like a fluorescent color. It is crazy, and absolutely love it because I don't have any other shade in my collection like it. And these 2 shimmers are beautiful. So there are pros obviously to this palette, but as a palette overall with just 5 shades and 2 of the shades are duds for me, that's not a good ratio. So I could definitely declutter this and I wouldn't really miss it in my collection, which is sad to say because this is my favorite brand, I would say, of indie eyeshadow at the moment. But definitely I would, if I had to get rid of this palette, save these 3 shades because I just think they're kind of special. So yeah, this one would be in the bottom 5, but it would be top of the bottom 5. Like this one would if I only had to get rid of 4, this one would be saved, if that makes sense. All right, next up we've got the Jewels and Gem from Odin's Eye. Now I have done some pretty looks with this palette, so I'm not gonna deny that there are some pretty shades in this palette, but it's no surprise if you've been on my channel for quite a while, I don't like Odin's Eye formula, and I, you know, lust over the color stories. Their palettes are very, very pretty, but I just know ultimately their formula is just not for me. And as much as people say, oh, they've changed their formula over time, I just personally don't see it. So anyway, this one I think is a beautiful color story. I just wish that some of these shades would actually work. There are some really, really, really dark shimmers in here, which have very, very interesting color to them, or like a, you know, tone. And the problem is they're just so awfully dry. Like I literally had to like dig into these to get any kind of pigment on my eyes. And it's been like that since the get-go. It's not like it's gotten older and it's like that. This palette has always been like that. And I feel the same of the other Odin's Eye palettes that I used to have that I've ended up decluttering. So this is definitely a palette that I don't feel like I would really miss. I actually kind of kept it to just have one Odin's Eye palette left as a reference point. I have considered purchasing some of their newer palettes that have recently come out. I'm kind of waiting. Like I might just bite the bullet and try another palette of theirs, see if I'm going to eat my words or not. Potentially I will. I would hope so. I actually want to like Odin's Eye because it's so popular and reasonably affordable too. And they come out with some beautiful color stories. Like I said, I just really don't care for the formula. So this one is another one where if I had to declutter palettes, I would be happy to say goodbye to this. All right, then we have the Midnight palette from Beauty Bay. Now, I love Beauty Bay formula, but this palette is just simply too large, and the color story is just not interesting enough for me. It is just purple and blue, and I need some variety. Like, this would have been a much better, like, I knew this was going to be a monochromatic palette. I knew it. Like, it's not like it was a surprise to me when I got it. Like, but I think at the time I didn't realize that it was just a stupid purchase. I actually got it as a gift, but I did request to have it. And I just wish that I was thinking a little bit more, because I don't wear blue all the time. I don't wear purple all the time. And it would have been a much better palette if it was a little bit more, like, I don't know, concise, and maybe had a little bit of neutral in there to play around with these colors. Much like the Book of Magic. Like, I used to have the Book of Magic palette from Beauty Bay. I absolutely loved it. I had to chuck it because the formula just went bad on me. And this one had some shades from the Book of Magic, and I was excited to try it and get it because, you know, I wanted some of those shades back, but it didn't. But the good thing about the Book of Magic is it has a lot of different tones and variety, whereas this one clearly obviously doesn't. It's just a monochromatic purple blue palette. And I wouldn't miss it if I said goodbye to it, unfortunately. I think the quality is fine, but it's not for me. Okay, next up we have the Sigma Corderosa. I know that I've been working on this in projects. Like, why am I working on a palette that I really don't really like very much and I haven't liked for like 3 years? I don't know why. You can't tell me. You can't tell me why, because I do not know. This is my only Sigma palette. It's the only one I've ever tried, and it's always put me off trying more from Sigma because the formula is really just not very interesting to me. I loved the color story when I got this, but there were issues straight away. Where is it? This shade over here never showed up on my skin. The pigmentation was just like non-existent. And I felt like these topper shimmers are kind of a little gritty and not very nice to use. They're not the type, like, I like more creamy toppers if you're gonna use a topper shimmer. And these are kind of gritty, they're not the best. But, you know, over the years, I have learned to appreciate this palette for what it is. It's just not my cup of tea. I still really love the color story, and I actually can do some really pretty looks with this. So sometimes it does surprise me, but most of the time it just kind of just doesn't live up to the expectation that I have for this palette. I really thought I was going to love this palette, and it's always disappointed me for whatever reason. And I wouldn't be mad to say goodbye to this palette. It's been on the chopping block for many years now, and I've always kept it. And I think I'm also keeping it because it's my only Sigma palette, and it's a good reference point. I love the color story. I can do pretty looks with it. And it wasn't super cheap either. So yeah, I think I'm being stubborn with this one. Maybe in my next declutter, it won't be saved. But this one, yeah, definitely had to be at the bottom. And then the absolute worst palette in my collection, I would say, is this one from Romand. So this is a K-Beauty brand. And I know that with K-Beauty brands, the pigmentation and the shadows that you get, you can't compare it to like indie makeup in the EU or US. It's just completely different. K-Beauty in itself is very subtle, and I get all of that. And I picked a very, very neutral palette. This is the Mahogany Garden palette. I picked it because, you know, I'm going to pick a neutral palette. If I like it, then obviously I can use this palette. It's very neutral, and it would be an easy palette for me to have in my collection. The problem is there's 2 glitter shades, and they're the type of glitter shades that you would get from a Makeup Revolution brand like palette, from the old Colourpop glitter shades that just nobody tends to like at all. I mean, this one seems to be more like of the Colourpop, and then this one seems to be more of the Revolution type glitter that you get in like those palettes. So straight away, not happy that there's 2 glitter shades. I didn't know that they were going to be glitter shades when I purchased it. This is also not a cheap palette, and I feel like the quality of the shades and the formula, it feels to me like an 8 to 10-ish pound palette. Something you get in the drugstore. This was like 20-something pounds, I believe. Something like that. And for what it is, it's just very, very, very poor. So I think I'm also like looking at it from like how much I've spent on this palette versus what it is actually giving me. And it's really just giving me 2 shimmer shades that are basically satin shades, a bunch of mattes, and 2 glitters that I don't like. So it's hard to like this palette. I will say some of these mattes perform fine, and I did like them when I used the palette, but as a palette overall, just very lackluster and not my cup of tea. So learned my lesson. If I ever try any more K-beauty palettes, and I know that there are lots out there, or like even C-beauty palettes where they do have that more of that indie quality, I would absolutely try it. But I think Romand, I'll stick to just maybe their lip products and other stuff because they do really nice makeup. I just don't think maybe the eyeshadow is for me. All right, so those were my bottom 5 palettes in my collection. And honestly, I wouldn't be that upset if they all disappeared from my collection today. It's not a big deal. Now these next 5 will be my top 5. And like I said, it was really hard to select these, to be fair. There's some that are like, absolutely, I would definitely not get rid of them. But then some others where I've kind of thrown them in, but I think there probably are other palettes in my collection that I could swap them out for. It's like, you know, it's whatever I felt today. In 5th place, this is kind of the last one that I picked as well. So this is one of the ones where I could swap it out for a different palette in my collection. I was kind of struggling a little bit, like, which one am I going to pick? Because there's just so many to add into 5. I feel like this is a really hard challenge. Anyway, so I actually ended up picking my Glamnatrix Rich Romantic because I really genuinely love the formula. And also, I think with this type of color story, there's so much variety that you can do with this. And you have the special shades, you have mattes that work beautifully. You know, I can do just a neutral look. I can do a pop of peach. I can do purple. I can do very light. It's actually a really beautiful palette and something that I can use pretty much all year round. So I thought this was a good choice for me to pick if I had to get, like, let's say, get rid of all the rest of the palettes in my collection and I just keep these top 5. I think this would be a good, smart choice. Those are a newer palette and I feel like the quality would last a little bit longer than some of my older ones. All right, next up we have the Cosmic Beauty Delicious Delights. I have 3 of their palettes. This is the only one that's made it into the top 5. I think ultimately if I want to go for like some bright, colorful makeup throughout the year and I only have 5 palettes, I think this is a really good one to keep in my collection because the formula is beautiful and I have a lot of fun with it. I actually do get like a really special shade here where it shows pink, but actually it flips green. So it's very versatile in terms of what you can do in the palette. And obviously you have the rows. You have the green row, you have the pink row, you have the purple row, the blue row, but you have a couple of splashes of neutral shades or kind of more like warm neutral shades that you kind of can work and combine with the rest of the palette. The only thing I will say is there's not that much depth to this palette, but obviously I can use that. I can go into a different palette and kind of like make it darker if I need to. But I think this is a really beautiful spring summer palette. And I wanted to keep some color in my collection if I was only going to keep like 5 palettes, let's say. So I definitely feel like this is one of the top palettes that I have and I don't see myself decluttering it at all. Okay, so this next one won't come as a surprise. It's the Shadow Kiss from Alter Ego. I go on about this as it's like one of my favorite palettes of all time and I can't like get rid of it. It has to be in my top 5. Yes, it is a dupe for Natasha Denona. I don't have the Glam palette, but I don't need it because I actually kind of like Alter Ego formula. I don't need to spend the extra money to get the Natasha Denona formula. And I love the color story. And I love the mattes in here. And you normally would never hear me say, oh, I love the mattes in eyeshadow palette because I'm much more of a shimmer person. But I think the mattes in here are so beautiful. There's just something about them that works for me. I don't know what it is, but I really love the tones. It's very neutral, obviously a little more cool tone, but I generally really love this palette. It's also part of my pan up palette for this year. So I'm hoping to get some pans in here and for it to look a little bit more loved and abused because yeah, I want to use it quite a bit more this year, but it had to be in my top 5. Okay, next up we had to have Gloss Gods. So I have Dancing in the Sky. I think ultimately this is still my favorite Gloss Gods palette that I've ever owned and had and tried and whatnot. So this is an all shimmer palette, but I really do find this absolutely stunning. It looks blue, but you actually have a lot of, I mean, you can see the differences actually on camera. You have a lot of different tones of blue. You also have some flips of yellow. You have some purples and a little flip of blue. It is very, very versatile. And yeah, obviously you can use it as a companion palette. You can actually go in and use this palette all over the lid and it still look gorgeous. So I love this and I don't know why they don't have this on the website because I think it's one of the best palettes that they've ever released, that I've ever tried. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And I think just the tones are just so interesting, and they're all different from each other too. So yeah, I love, love, love this palette. Also, the texture on some of these shades are very interesting. Some of them are more that thin formula. Some of them are like this, and it's more like a chunky formula. Very, very interesting. And then you have this one, which is not necessarily like a special shade. It's more of your standard shimmer. So they have like everything for everybody in this palette. Really, really love it. And then I have another Gloss Gods. I mean, are you surprised? But it's the Gal on Jupiter. I love this palette. I think I fell in love with this palette last year. I mean, I did. And I still love it. I think it gives the most delicious, beautiful, rich tones on the lids. And again, it's more cool tone, but you have these absolutely amazing, like, I don't know, just stand out shades that really pop on the lids. And you can also go like a little bit more purple with this one. You've got like some taupes, you've got some grays, gunmetal gray. You've got really nice browns, like rich taupey browns and chocolatey browns. And I don't know, I just think this palette is also, you look at it and it's like, it's not super versatile, but actually it really is. It's really, really beautiful. And I always say, oh, it's the best, you know, New Year's palette, but I feel like I could wear this all year round. Sometimes it could be a little bit too much if you're like wearing it for an everyday use, because some of these shades are literally like blinding, but I'm not going to deny that I would absolutely keep this palette. I think it's definitely my favorite palette at the moment in my collection, so I really, really love it. All right, and there you have it. Those are my bottom 5 and top 5 eyeshadow palettes in my collection. What do you think? I definitely feel like my top 5 can change, as I said. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!